Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Mysteries of the Universe, part of the Future Science TV series. And this is Dr. John DeSalvo, a biophysicist. And joining me are my two colleagues, Dr. J.J. Hurtak, an Orientalist, a researcher, archeologist, man of everything, and his most beautiful, lovely, and talented wife, also an author, an archaeologist, Dr. Desiree Hurtak. And I always said you two are the most famous research couples in the world because you do such incredible work, from the pyramids to the Dead Sea Scrolls to ley lines, you name it. And it's an honor to do this series together. And also, Dr. J.J. Hurtak is very famous and well known for the book, The Keys of Enoch, and plus many other books too, The Oversoul. So his name is, I'm sure, is pretty well known to most of you. So thank you for joining us. And if you like our channel, subscribe and give us an up. Okay. Well, we're going to discuss, after consultation, the Dead Sea Scrolls, because it seems like they were really big, right? Decades ago, everybody was talking about them, and there was conspiracy theories. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. And Dr. JJ's idea was to really focus on the angelic aspect of it, the giants, the angelic wars. But I just want to take a quick minute or two to give people a background of what the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know everybody's heard of them, but maybe people don't know what they are. I find them one of the most craziest and unusual thing is that most great discoveries are made by accident. It's just like, well, what the heck? So in the Dead Sea Scroll area back in 1947, the Dead Sea is the lowest body of water, and all around that area are these limestone caves, right? That are weathered, and people used to hide things. There were no banks in those days, right? You can go and deposit your shekels into a bank. Well, I guess you could, right, at the temple, but people usually buried their valuables or hid them in the caves. And especially around the Dead Sea, there are these incredible number of caves. So there was some shepherd boys that were tendering their sheep and goats. And I did several versions of the story, but I like the one which I think is the most accurate, where they lost a goat and they were looking for it. And one of the boys threw a rock into one of the caves. Who knows if he was trying to see if there was a goat in there and scare him out, or was just, like we pitch rocks in the water. Who knows? And he threw a rock in and there was a crash. So, wow, like a pottery, something being broken. Talk about an accidental discovery, right? And so him and his two brothers went home, but they decided to come back the next day. And basically that was one of the caves where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. They came back and found pottery jars. I have a couple of, let's see, left, right there, up there, miniature samples of the jars. And inside there were scrolls, and they were really ancient. And they took a bunch of them, tried to sell them, and maybe you could take up the story from there and follow up a little bit, kind of a background.
Well, I want to talk about you, John, because you actually have published a book on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So can you hold that book up for us?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
This was published by Barnes and Nobles, and it was really like a kind of like a coffee table book, with every page. It's out of print, so you can't get it unless you go like the eBay or something. Really beautiful pictures.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to have been a book that was, just a fun book, basic information, nothing, heavy in research. And it was published in 5 different languages and also on paperback, but it's all out of print. And it's too bad. It's one of the most beautiful books. I'm not just saying it. They really put the illustrations together. I basically wrote the text, but just to give you an idea. So that was my introduction into the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then I also got into the possible mystical discussion of angels in there, which we'll talk about later. So thank you for asking me.
Yeah, well, definitely, and that's exciting. So I think that's called the cave where they threw the rocks. And to me, if they were throwing rocks, they might have been trying to see if there was any snakes in there, because sometimes you do that, in the
11 principal caves.
Yeah, but ultimately there's 11 caves, but that was called Qumran Cave 1. That was the main one, and of course the first one that they found. And they really, were trying to. It took 2 years till these kids decided to try to sell. And from what I know, the first place they went to, the guy goes, "Get lost," and then they finally.
Yeah. I think it was a shoe repairman. He was like an antiquities dealer or something.
Yep, the
Exactly.
guy finally bought it for like the equivalent of about $300 today, which is a lot of money. And back in those days, it was like $25. That was back in 1947.
Yeah.
Actually, they found it in what?
47, but it was really until 1954 that they got most of the documents.
Yeah.
So let me say by introduction, I had the opportunity as a young lad to meet Rabbi Nelson Glick, who was one of my heroes.
Oh, really?
Reformed
Wow.
biblical scholar who during World War II worked behind the scenes on behalf of the Allies, but also was an archaeologist who probed and found the caves, places where the horses of King Solomon were kept. Inspired me to go to the University of Chicago, where I studied with Professor Mircea Eliade from Romania, who was the top comparative religionist in the world at that time, and also Norman Gobe, who was a Judaic scholar, who was also interested in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Qumran community produced many offshoots, and scholars were debating in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, who were the Essenes? Do they really have this talent to have so many scrolls of such magnificence?
And I have to say, of course, and I'm sure you have this in your book, they're not sure that it was the Essenes that put this together. And basically what it is a library. I mean, you basically have all or many of the Bible texts, what we call the Old Testament texts. Isaiah was one of the first scrolls that these kids found. And they also have some mystical texts, like we were talking about the Book of Enoch. Right. And in fact, in that first cave, they found something called the Book of Giants of Enoch. And so that also is something we want to bring out in this discussion.
Sure. I want to follow up on the biblical thing you said. Why this is so important is that they found several complete manuscripts like the Book of Isaiah and others, and they dated the Dead Sea Scrolls with carbon-14, so it was anywhere from 100, 200 BC to 100 AD. These texts do not differ much from the current Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, one or two Hebrew letters out of the entire 66 chapters of the Isaiah was different from what they had written about 2,000 years ago. So we should talk about just the date of these ideas. They were from just before Christ to a little bit after Christ, right? Something like.
Right. I guess the conclusion is it shows that our current Bible, at least the Old Testament, is pretty much intact. It didn't go through a lot of editing and changes. By the way, too bad you guys weren't looking in the newspaper in 1954, because the follow-up before what you said was one of the owners wanted to sell it. He couldn't sell it. He needed cash. So he put this ad in the Wall Street Journal. I'm not making this up. The 4 Dead Sea Scrolls, biblical manuscripts dating back to at least 200 BC are for sale. This would be an ideal gift to an educational or religious institution by an individual or group. Box F206, the Wall Street Journal.
Well, what we should say is that pretty much all been recollected and put it into the Israeli Museum, and that's where they are. But there's been a lot of controversy with this. I'd like to just mention a few of the scrolls that are in Cave 1 that we talked about, and we mentioned Isaiah, and it is amazing. People say, oh, the Bible's been changed, the Bible's been altered, and I go back 2,000 years to the time of Jesus, and basically, letter for letter, it's pretty much the same. That's amazing.
Yeah. It is.
And Dr. Hurtak's done some commentary on some of the other scrolls that were in Cave 1, like the community rule, because they had also found, in addition to the mystical writings that we're going to talk about and the Bible, in Hebrew and in Aramaic, is some of the documents were found. But they also had rules. They had different things. So the community rule was one of them. Habakkuk, which is in ours. The War Scroll, that is also related directly to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dr. Hurtak also has done commentary on that, because it basically says how to position yourselves in a battle, right? I mean, it's amazing. Right. Anyway, then also they had, and I'm going to just skip a few, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Judges, Samuel, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Psalms, Micah, Zephaniah, Jubilees, the Book of Noah. That's an interesting thing, because that's also talking, Noah was connected with Enoch in that ongoing sense. Testament of Levi, who is, of course, the priest. The Book of Giants. This is really our topic today.
That's cool.
Apocryphon of Moses, and that's a very unusual scroll as well. And just going on also with Daniel. So it's pretty much the Bible and a few other things. It's a library thrown together.
And a library of also the pseudepigrapha, or books that were not recognized as kosher, that were not put into the canon when the scholars gathered in Jerusalem. What I want to say by background, Desiree and I have had the opportunity to do archaeological work throughout the Middle East as a young scholar. I had the opportunity to also look at the Coptic Nag Hammadi text in Egypt, and had the opportunity also to meet some of the more famous scholars who had worked with the translation of the Enoch material. And this set me on a path of looking at the mystical intellectual heritage that was there at the very beginning of scribal information that unfortunately was marginalized in the post-New Testament period. Unbelievable as it may seem, scholars were still debating as recently as the first decade of the 21st century whether or not there was a bridge between Old Testament mystical Judaism and the coming of the New Testament. Clearly, the evidence shows that Christianity was highly influenced by speculative and mystical theology that was throughout the Middle East.
In fact, of course, if it really was the Essenes, I mean, we're told that, of course, they were concerned about cleansing the body, what foods you eat, but they were also quite mystical in their origin. And I just want to say one other thing. We talked about the 11 caves of the Dead Sea. Someone now has more recently in the 1990s found a 12th cave, but it really didn't have much in it. So I think we can stick to the fact of the 11 caves. But John, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you know about the angels cosmology that was written in this?
Sure. Maybe to close out just quickly the section on the discoveries. I found what they found in Cave 3, the copper scroll, which I know you're familiar with. Every scroll that was found was like on parchment, leather, whatever. But in Cave 3, way in the back, separated from the other scrolls, they found a copper scroll. Now, copper was very valuable and obviously was going to last longer. So you got to figure whatever they put on this copper scroll must have been important to them. And also copper doesn't oxidize that easily. And actually, there were something like 3,000 Hebrew characters punched out on it.
I was going to say, if you've ever seen it, and of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls did go around the United States and probably other parts of the world, and they're so small. Even the ones that were written in ink, so to speak, are like minuscule. I mean, everyone would have to wear glasses to really read the entire text. Now, I don't know if they were saving papyrus paper or whatever, but I can't imagine doing those 3,000 characters on copper. That must have been incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And look at the modern fragments, both on papyrus, on leather, as well as on the copper scroll.
And speaking of fragments, the majority of the text, one of the reasons the Book of Giants is so difficult, even though the Manichaeans have a copy of some of their own texts of the Book of Giants, but it's all broken up. It's pieces, it's fragments. A lot of these fragments they've never been able to really logically put together.
No, and and if, let's say somebody listening, they're saying, all right, so what? The Bible, it's the same as it was, and there's rules about the community, the sectarian, non-sectarian. But the copper scroll is like the national treasure story. What it does, it lists 64 specific places in Jerusalem and the Jericho area where buried treasure is located. Wow. Now, we don't know what that means. Does that mean the treasure of the second temple before it was destroyed by the Romans. They went out and hid it. So this copper scroll, the most expensive material they use, hidden in a special part of the cave, basically gives the exact location. It describes, like, you go to this tree, go so far, dig down so far. It tells you, for example, if it's gold, utensils, garments, how much is present. I mean, it's really, and they do say at the end, there's another copper scroll that will help in finding the treasure. And I know a lot of Dead Sea Scroll researchers have tried to find it. Some famous ones, but nobody really has. So it actually is the national treasure story. I think that's just kind of cool. So I wanted to throw that in. So if you think everything else is boring, you can look at there may be 64 places of incredible wealth hidden somewhere in the Dead Sea or Jerusalem area.
Well, archaeology is a sport in the country of Israel. Every place you look, you find the treasury of great knowledge and wisdom. And I'd like to discuss with you and Desiree the importance of what is in the cosmology of the Dead Sea Scrolls, because there are over 8,000 fragments. I've talked to Dr. Emmanuel Toff, who is in charge of present-day collections and research going on throughout the world. But people have to understand that there was a reason why righteous men and women left Jerusalem and what they felt is a corrupt priesthood to go out into the desert and have, as it were, a library of teaching, have scribes that brought together the most valuable documents of the ancient biblical world. And on the basis of my research, it is clear that the Dead Sea Scrolls as a collection are a model, a blueprint of how we can take a path to the stars through higher intellectual, mystical experiences.
And if I can say, a path with the angels, because they really felt, and I want your comments on this as well, John, that the angels came down to help humanity. They were interacting with them, the angels, each other, humanity, working together to protect ourselves. So tell us a little bit about what you had discovered with these forces.
Yeah, I like what you said too, because as you know, both of us are interested in the Book of Enoch, the apocryphal book that didn't make it into the Old Testament. By the way, Catholic angelology is all based on the Book of Enoch. So there's a lot in there. And they talk about the good and the bad angels, how the bad angels, the fallen angels, we won't go into that whole story, how they corrupted man and taught him war. But there was also good angels, and they were fighting. And that goes as far as even to the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have the sons of light and the sons of darkness. And there's a battle in heaven. Now, all this ties together with everything I feel I studied for the last 40 years of my life. We say, as above, so below. This war of the angels is reflected on a war on the earth and vice versa. It's all tied in. So what I didn't discover this, but what I didn't even realize, it's funny, when I wrote the book on the Dead Sea Scrolls, you can only read so much. It's just such amazing material. But there's something called the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice. And that was found in one of the caves in about, I think it's found in 8 manuscript forms and one at Masada. But it's very corrupt, and that's the problem, trying to reconstruct it. But what it is basically is an angelic liturgy composed of 13 sections for the first 13 Sabbaths of the year. We don't know if they repeated it 4 times, so it went the whole year. But what it does is basically, you can't really understand the book of Revelations, Ezekiel, and Enoch without the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice, because it ties in the description of the angels, the Merkabah, the throne chariot vision. But again, the problem is it's very corrupt. And I recently purchased the dissertation of it, and it's like, wow. So,
well, you don't mean
incredible.
Corrupt, not to interrupt, you don't mean corrupt in a bad way. You mean it's basically broken up and fragmented, right?
Right. Yeah. Like if it was the Gettysburg Address, it would be 4 scores and
blank,
our
blank.
forefathers. Yeah. What the hell did they say in there? We don't know. But a lot of the experts, they're getting really good at this. They can try to figure out what they call it a lacuna, what's missing.
Yeah,
and but there's enough in there that I've been reading, and this is going to take me a year to complete. But I think, but all the experts on this say that this part of the Dead Sea Scrolls gives Revelation, Enoch, all the vision, every Ezekiel. It really puts it together exactly what you're saying, the War of the Angels.
Well, let's talk about
the War of the Angels and the 200 they came down. I'm showing a picture here of one of our archaeological projects in the Golan Heights. This is on the Mount Hermon, where according to most Jewish and Christian scholars, the 200 angels came down that gave the human race the weapons of war.
Right, so let's read Genesis 6 for just a minute because it's important. It comes right before the biblical flood, and this is all connected with the Book of Enoch and the angels. And I have to say, the angels, the positive guys, spoken of in the Book of Giants is the ones we know: Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel. So these are the four main angels that supposedly came down to fight against 200 Nephilim giants that had come down to earth connected with Mount Hermon. So Dr. Hurtak is going to read us the key part of Genesis 6, and then we'll expound on this according to the Book of Enoch and the Book of Giants, both of which are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I want to say that Cave 1 and Cave 2 had the Book of Giants of Enoch, and Cave 7 and Cave 11 and a few other fragments had the actual Book of Enoch, which is
so what we're saying is there's the biblical tradition, and then there's the pseudepigrapha, the books in dispute that have what we believe to have even greater psychological and scientific relevance today in the world of contact with extraterrestrial beings that are, according to government disclosure, connected with some unsavory experiences of genetic manipulation.
And just talking about the giants, we know, whether you look at the Greek mythology, I know you're probably a semi-expert on that, they were giants as well, but also all over the world, there is legends of ancient giants that had lived.
And we have found in South Africa even footprints a meter in length. Can you imagine? That have been reconstructed by South African paleontologists to equal beings that would be 28 feet in height. I mean, these are enormous beings that you see in the statuary of Egypt and China, giants that were there in a pre-biblical period of time. So let's read from the Bereshith Bara, the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. Now it came about that when men started to grow in numbers on the surface of the ground, and daughters were born unto them, then the sons of the true God, B'nai Elohim is the Hebrew, began to notice that the daughters of men, that they were good looking, and they went taking wives for themselves, namely all whom they chose. After that, Yahweh, or Yod-Heh-Voti, or the Hashem, the divine name of God, said, my spirit shall not act towards man indefinitely, in that he is also flesh. Accordingly, his days shall amount to 120 years. The Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days, namely the fallen ones of the angels.
Or the giants, as some people want to qualify them. And let me say a few other names that were given connected with and the Gibborim. So these are all connected with these giants or the Watchers, which were kind of, we'll get into in a minute, but actually part of the energies of the local hierarchies.
These names are used interchangeably and sometimes in collective description of different hierarchies interacting with the human race. Again, the Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days, and after that, when the sons of the true God continued to have relations with the daughters of men, that they bore sons unto them that were mighty ones or giants, who were of old, men of fame or distinction.
Like the Greeks, we would say, Zeus and all the other gods connected with them. So what's very interesting is that right then comes the flood. Now, I know there's a lot of New Age people that actually like to say we're hybrids connected with these B'nai Elohim, but the whole idea of the flood was to get back to the original genetic code structure. But that's a different topic. The Book of Giants really talks about the fact that these angels, the four archangels that we know, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, actually saw the corruption that was taking place, and they came down and literally battled with 200 of these giant figures and basically won the battle with certain types of elements that they use from heaven.
You hear of a giant drawing that was made presumably by a person who saw this type of intelligence in the mountains of Mexico. I privately talked to several presidents in Latin American countries who acknowledge the fact that some of these extraterrestrial probes are, shall we say, piloted by gigantic beings who have taken human subjects for experimentation. As science fiction as this may sound, I believe that there's a seedbed of truth in recognizing that historically, in all generations of humanity, there have been interactions with the cosmic cultures. Some for and some for the destruction.
When you were reading from the Bible, that section on Enoch, if though any listeners want to know to fill in the gaps, purchase the first and second book of Enoch on Amazon, because it actually fills in the details. It actually says the evil angels taught women how to wear makeup and perfume and all that. I'm sure the feminists like that, but supposedly that was evil, and showed them the art of war. And so it's very, very interesting. I was going to say, after you read that description, it sounded like a bar in the South Bronx I used to go to, but I probably not. But you got to put these all together. And this is what I find fascinating about all this. You read the Bible, the Book of Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the other apocryphal graphical books you mentioned, the giants. I don't know if anybody's done that. Has anybody really tried to take a whole flow chart and put it all together and fill in the blanks?
Well, I think we have, and it's very, very fascinating because it shows that there's more than just us on this earth that's watching, and there's just not a few, Trinity powers. There's many, many levels of intelligence in the heavenly realms. Some are positive. They're feeding us positive information, wanting us to wake up, but there's a lot of negativity. Yes, that they actually came and taught men the art of warfare. That is a really negative thing. Think of the last 6,000 years that even we know about, not even going beyond that. And there's wars. We basically call things like it was World War I, it was World War II, we call things the Korean War. What happened to the rest of humanity? Where is this energy coming from? That's the important thing. And let me just say that even the archangels, the positive ones in the Book of Giants, supposedly brought down fire, Nopthra, and brimstone. Now, Nopthra is actually like a petrochemical, so it can be used to destroy things. These people were not primitive, and we know from the building of the Great Pyramid, and John, you're an expert in that, this is not a simple thing of one person putting a stone on top of another, even if you had a whole 15, 20 people putting a stone on top of another.
Well, a few years ago, my students, and by the name of Thomas Winder, was doing archaeological work in the country of Jordan, 30 miles on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea. On the West Bank, of course, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls collections of fragments, but they were able to find the areas of Sodom and Gomorrah.
But what they found at this area in Jordan was what they think was like a trinitite, which is a type of glassy material. So it had to have been literally bombarded by a lot of heat and a lot of energy. So, we were saying maybe there really was an advanced technology that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe there really was an advanced technology that destroyed the 200 angels. And Dr. Hurtak in his book also writes about Semyaza. Well, the Book of Giants uses a similar word of something like Semhanzia or something like that, that is connected with the same force that comes down into the earth.
So I'm showing here the cover of the Keys of Enoch, which I authored in 1973 after I had a series of remarkable experiences with the angelic light that surrounded my body when I was using the ancient Hebrew prayers that you referred to, John. The Ma'asaba, Merkaba, the science of the chariot, of the throne, or the process of ascension, was seen primarily as a psychological experience or mystical experience. But in some instances, you see actual teleportation, actual biolocation events connected with supreme intelligence called the ultra-terrestrial. And as a result of that experience, I went on to author in the Enochian tradition several important teachings that point to the fact that we are still in this dialectic between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, and we have to choose to take the higher path, and that can only come through higher compassion, charity, understanding, and understanding of the worldwide mythos or myth of contact that has scientific and psychological ramifications for our time.
That doesn't sound really promising, though, when you look at today's world, unfortunately.
However, the four archangels really, it kind of brings out in the book of Giants of Enoch that these beings really are here to protect us. And we believe we've been in a type of quarantine because these other angels haven't come back. In fact, some of the scroll actually talks about that they were placed in prisons in heavenly realms or even lower heavenly realms.
Yeah.
That's interesting that there would be prisons in other spaces. I mean, why not just here? So it's very, very interesting. That's what we talk about is the whole cosmology that we're opening up to now. That's much more vast, much more powerful. And we're part of a great, not only galactic family, but a multi-dimensional cosmology.
We were living the Adam and Eve story in an Enochian sense of now realizing we're not alone in the universe, to the Dead Sea Scrolls that speak of the Moed Tzedek, the righteous teacher, allows us to understand that there are those who had and have contact with the higher worlds. And 3, we have decision-making at our fingertips as agents of free choice to go with those who have true scientific and psychological knowledge to help humanity versus the war game that the scroll of Enoch or the text of Enoch warns us against.
And what's interesting, we haven't really talked about the Book of Enoch, also present again in Cave 7 and Cave 11, I believe, 711, in the Qumran scrolls, but was the fact that Enoch was taken to these other heavens. And Paul, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, even writes that he was taken to the third heaven. And basically, it goes beyond the third heaven. Even the Kabbalists used to talk about the 7 heavens, and some talk about even the 10 heavens. And at the highest level is where there's the pure light, and the other ones are really more what we would call experimental realms, or we're in a schoolhouse, so to speak.
Well, part of where my work comes in, I was going to say Paul only went up to the third heaven because he didn't have a valid Metro card. He could have gotten a little farther. But being a biophysicist, and my specialty really is superstring theory, and also quantum physics, even though I'm not an expert. My whole perspective of this is like, as you know, and I know Dr. Hurtak has written articles on string theory, it postulates the existence of many spatial dimensions for it to work. This is not science fiction. This is science. And quantum mechanics explains a whole world that only exists if you observe it. Like Einstein said, if I'm not looking at the moon, does that mean it doesn't exist? I mean, it gets really weird. And quantum entanglement is even the most incredible thing, because here's the funny thing people don't know. They throw these words around, but what I'm trying to say is all the things you talk about, I believe there's a scientific explanation which we haven't discovered. But if it wasn't for quantum entanglement, we wouldn't have had the transistor, the laser, but we don't know how it works. That's the crazy thing. So we could actually use technology based on a scientific assumption or guess without understanding it. But I think we're getting closer. And the point I'm trying to make is I think this is all going to tie in with higher levels of consciousness that can be explained through the brain or higher, beings that exist. And a lot of the phenomena through quantum physics, superstring theory, hidden dimensions, and it doesn't really matter. It'll all come together.
See, and I would say I agree with you wholeheartedly. And what's interesting, when you say like Michael, or the texts that we're talking about say that Michael and Gabriel and Raphael came here, I don't believe they actually have to leave where they are and fly down here. I think it's all a matter of consciousness. They can materialize. anywhere they want to be, and they can view the battle. It's not a matter of moving one body to another. It's entanglement. It is that non-locality where they simply materialize where they're needed. And I think that's important for all of us to realize when we call upon God, when we call upon the Christ, when we call upon the angels, that, you're not taking them away from what they're doing up there. You're simply aligning yourself with them, and they're aligning with you as part of their emanations of consciousness. So I think it's very important for our own spiritual growth.
Well, Desiree, I went to several of the archaeological zones. I use several of the names in the prayers that you find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the name of Hashem, the vocalization of the 4 letters of the divine name, Yod He Bod He. And in that context, I had experiences with the light where I felt not only the light around my body, but as we see here in this one picture taken of me in Mexico back around the year 2000, light surrounded my body.
And there's also one over Jerusalem, which is amazing how the light beam comes right down.
Consciousness was raised on high, and you had this consciousness expansion. And you suddenly realize the micro universe, which is your body, is in the macro universe. That quantum relationship that you just mentioned, John, is so important. That information is downloaded into the human brain. We're able to experience the fact that we are multidimensional beings growing up in a vast and awesome universe. And part of that is realization of that we are localized in the 3 dimension, but through the higher power of the mind, we can go into the 5th, 6th, 7th dimension that the ancient scholars and mystics speak of. In those higher dimensions, though, you are blessed by contact experience of seeing these other life forms, some of which are the positive, and some of which are the experimental. And I think that's the great contribution of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scroll, is to tell us that we are here in a schoolhouse of learning, and we must take a higher path and a higher choice, lest we found ourselves with simply the war games of the lower, disobedient Nephilim.
Well, why I like you guys' work, and you're the only 2 I really work with at this higher level, because one, you're hell of a nice guys. You're wonderful, and you got big hearts. You really want to help the world. Everybody who knows you knows that. But 2 is I'm really a scientist. That's what I am first. I'm obviously a believer in this. And you and I, Desiree, JJ, and I, we are looking at scientific explanations for many of this too.
We think of it this way. Future science is science guided by consciousness. Consciousness is on both sides of the brain and beyond. And here the spiritual and scientific converge because true science doesn't contradict true spiritual cosmology, vice versa. We are living at a dynamic time. I believe in the next few years, government disclosure of cosmic cultures will make us re-examine the ancient text and realize the Dead Sea Scrolls are very important because they're a jewel in a junk heap. They represent the higher speculative philosophies and cosmologies that are brought together out of 2 major religious systems, a bridge that can bring all religious and psychological systems into a harmonic.
And if I can just do a plug for our website, which is keysofenoch.org, we also have a link there to the biblical scrolls. Dr. Hurtak has actually done commentary on every scroll of the Bible, so much like what maybe the Essenes would have done at Qumran. And in addition to that, many of the mystical scrolls, as well as some of the scrolls from the Dead Sea. So that's all available on CD and hopefully soon streaming, which is one of our major projects.
You know, maybe my last thing I'll say is I'm going to pick up my shovel, a metal detector, and my copy of the Copper Scroll and see what I can find. And number 2 is, hey, there may be more caves out there, and who knows what we're going to find.
Well, we invite you to Mount Hermon, where we're going to do archaeological work, continue educational work, and recognize that it is the higher blueprint of contact with the higher worlds that gives us the incentive to push the envelope into space, future civilization, and the recognition that the Christ ideal is that there is a divine spark that continues beyond Mother Earth. And in that context, we have this precious body. We have this time period given to each of us to educate and to share goodness and grace rather than the theme of destruction and disobedience. So let us take, as it were, the great themes of the great scholars and the great mystics at Qumran as a point of departure, a springboard for a whole new image of mankind.
And I would say the Bible is as relevant today as it was 2,000, even 4,000, 5,000 years ago. And you just have to have the right
100%.
interpretation, which is what we've done.
That's the difference between Bible and Babel.
This is really a fantastic show. No, you guys are amazing. And I really believe JJ is a higher being, and he just has an insight into things that nobody else has. And for me, and it's amazing.
A true picture of what happens when you're in certain archaeological zones or sacred areas, using the hymns and the sacred prayers to energize your body completely in the nakedness of life, asking the Most High God or Mind of the universe to bless and to guide the research that's necessary to bring mankind together. And this, we understand the mysteries of the universe, John and Desiree and myself, to be our great forte.
And I just want to say the angels are still alive and well. They won the battle. We just have to reconnect with them and reconnect with the Godhead and the Christ, because that was the Essenes also recognized Jesus as the Christ.
Yes, but that'd be a whole another show, right? The Christianity ramifications of Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls, John the Baptist and all that. But anyway, maybe this is a good place to stop. And thank you both again. Thank you for your friendship of, 30 years. I can't even remember, and working together. You guys are number one in my book, and your hearts are in the right place.
What's your website, John?
Well, it's about 20 years old, hasn't been updated, but it's GizaPyramid.com. GizaPyramid.com. If anybody wants to contact me, Facebook's really the best place, because I'm on there a lot. Unfortunately, I'm on my maximum number of friends, but I do everything publicly, so you can still get my messages and my jokes. Don't forget my jokes. They're an integral part of my research. But Facebook would be the best place to contact me. And again, GizaPyramid.com was our main resite, which I have to update one of these days.
And our website is keysofenoch.org.
Or futurescience.org. So both are great. We also have the complete Bible and tape cassette or CD if you'd like to hear it, and a different cosmology, and a cosmology that's for the future.
May we be blessed, and may the doors to the stars continue to be open to us, the divine and the human coming together in partnership.
Actually, I have to say, First Enoch is on there too with Dr. Hurtak's commentary.
Fantastic. Well, listen, God bless you both, and God bless our listeners. And follow us on our series, and more exciting subjects to come. Just gets better and better. So thank you, guys, and take care.
Thank you.